Good morning. It's Memorial Day weekend, May 26, 2014, late morning, and I've decided to make a couple more firearm videos here. I have to clean the house later on. I'm expecting company, and there's nothing I'd rather not do than clean house today, but it has to be done. So in light of that, I'm going to do everything in my power to put it off as long as possible. So thought I'd make these videos here. I've cataloged in the past all my firearms, my current firearms, in case anyone might be interested down the road. Need to have some information on them, but I've got several old firearms here that I've inherited from my father via my mother, and I thought it would be a good idea to catalog those. So I'm going to start out here with probably the least interesting of them, and the one I have the least information on, and that would be this. This is a Bay State 410 single barrel shotgun, uh, top brake shotgun, brakes up here on top. This is made by a company. It says on there Bay State, well, Worcester, Massachusetts. Well, Bay State was a standalone fire company back in the 1800s, and they went out of business. They were taken over by a company called, I think, Hancock and Allen or something to that effect. And then later, Harrington and Richardson bought the name, and they put the name Bay State on a lot of their lower end hardware store variety shotguns. And I've been on the internet trying to find out more about this gun. The only other markings are up here on the barrel, and it says made in USA 410 gauge choke. Okay, it's going in and out of view here, but anyway, the only other marking again is the serial number, which is down here behind the trigger guard and also on the barrel. And I couldn't find much other than after Harrington and Richardson purchased that name, they made these shotguns between 1916 and 1942. And the only thing I could find, there was one guy on the internet that thought that the A prefix on the serial number indicated that it was made around the 1930s. Well, that kind of puts it in the right time frame for when my father had it. He probably had this gun, was probably given to him as when he was young. He lived on a rural Nebraska farm and did a lot of hunting with his buddies or whatever. So I really have no other history than that. It's been sitting in a closet for years and years over at Mom's old house, and now it's mine. So I've gotten more of an interest in it, more of an interest in firearms in general. They said it's a 410. It shoots the 410 shot shell. This happens to be a triple-aught buck. This gun wasn't designed for that. This was more or less of a field gun for a young hunter. They would have shot maybe number 6, number 8, bird shot or rabbit shot or something like that in there. So I don't ever plan on firing it again. I might someday. Someday I might have to. You never know. Might have to hunt again at some point for small game. And I don't know what else to do. It's just this is just going to be a safe queen and passed on down with the rest of the guns. So that's really not much more I can tell about the Bay State. Worcester, Massachusetts here. The Bay State 410 shotgun. So there it is on that one. And my next video, I'll move on to something a little more interesting. Okay, in the last video segment, I promised something a little more interesting, and here it is. Gosh, wow, where do I start? One beautiful firearm. This is my father's model 1894 Winchester lever action in 30-30. I don't know. I guess I'll start with the rifle itself. I don't know how Dad came to get this gun, but I have lots and lots of memories of it. It's also my mother's favorite gun. It reminds her of Dad, and I may have to take it up to let her handle it a little bit again because it's in my possession now, safely in the safe. Again, as I said, this is a Winchester Model 94. This is an iconic piece of firearm history in the United States. It's right up there with the Colts and the Smith & Wessons and the Brownings, 1911, and all of them. This is, it says here 30 WCF, that's 30 Winchester centerfire. It also means Winchester 30-30. This cartridge has been around forever. Excellent deer cartridge. This is what Dad used to hunt deer, and he's bagged several of them with it. I guess I can start by saying that I have memories of this from tromping around down through hill and dale down in the Ozarks with Dad. This was his firearm. Every November we were off deer hunting, and this was his rifle. And I'm surprised it's in as good a condition as it is. Dad wasn't known. He didn't really think about things as guns as works of art or historical artifacts. These were tools to him. He used them, meant to be shot, and boy, he shot them. And this is an amazing thing. The gun itself, if it were in total original condition, would be worth probably several $1,000s, maybe more. As far as I could tell on the internet, I did as much research as possible, and there's a ton of information out there on these firearms. I've nailed it down to the manufacturing date of this firearm as being 1919. So it's not quite an antique. Another 5 years, it'll be 100 years old. But it'll never be sold. I plan on passing this down, and hopefully down through the generations it will go. I have faint memories. Mom remembers it well, but I have faint memories of one night Dad just sat down with a bowl of water and a knife and just start cutting away on the stock of this gun. No, just off the top of his head. Just make it up as you go. He was an amazing artist. And he just took off and went crazy on this thing, and he did all sorts of carving on it. He's got carving up under here. He did both sides of the stock with different scenes of deer and what have you. So to me, it's an amazing piece of folk art, even though it probably detracts from the value of the gun. As I said, it doesn't matter. This is a family heirloom, a treasure, basically a treasure. So it's amazing. It just hung in Mom's kitchen in a cabinet for years and years and years. So everybody that went to her house, saw this thing. So a lot of people remember it. And when it finally came into my possession, when Mom moved to Kansas, I convinced her that it would be safer with me and I would take good care of it and pass it on. And she relinquished it to me. And the first thing I did was take it to a local gunsmith who I trusted. It really had me nervous for a while to give this possession of this gun. I made him give me a receipt for it, but he took it, broke it all down. I wanted to fire this gun, even though I was with Dad all the time. I never did shoot it. So I wanted to fire the gun, but before I did that, I wanted to make sure it was safe. It is an old firearm. Dad, like I said, he just shot the heck out of things. So I took it to the gunsmith. He tore it all apart and cleaned everything, polished everything, and he put a nice coat of lacquer on the stock and polished it up. I took it out to the range and I shot it several times and cleaned it. So now I can say I've shot it. It's perfectly functional. Uh, Sucker would drop a deer today as easily as it would back then. And but it's now going to be relegated to the safe, and I'll take it out and show it to anybody that wants to see it. But beautiful, beautiful gun. It is a prized possession and a treasure. So there you have it, the Winchester Model 94 lever action 1916 vintage in 30-30 Winchester. Well, just to keep the wow factor going, here's another treasure. This one, this one is amazing. This one, it's right up there with the Winchester. This one I do have a little more history of, but again, let's start with the gun itself. This this is truly, truly a piece of American history. Model 1851, Colt Navy. What a piece of work this is. Amazing firearm. Absolutely amazing. Um, these guns were made, I guess, from the 1850s on. This particular firearm, I researched it on the internet, and it was made between 1864 and 1865, the last 2 years of the Civil War. There's a very good chance that this firearm was used in the Civil War. If only it could talk. This is the American West right here. After the war, the Civil War, I mean, Billy the Kid, Wild Bill Hickok, all your big names, Buffalo Bill, all of them. They carried these. This was your ubiquitous sidearm. All your old Western movies have the Navy Colt. Very reliable gun. 36 caliber, cap and ball, black powder pistol. It uses, like I said, black powder. I don't know how old this stuff is. Dad used it a lot. He's got some in this little gun thing here to charge it, the charging thing, and he's got some of the caps that go on there, and a little sack of the 36 caliber lead balls. So the way you actually would load this thing is, it was a single action revolver, and the way you would have to load it was you would you have to load into each individual cylinder individually, pour your powder charge in there, put a ball in, tamp it down with this. It would just tamp each one down, rotate it to the next cylinder, do the same thing. When you got all 6 loaded, you put some sort of fat or something in there to keep it, lard or whatever, to keep it from cross-firing, because the sparks would fly out often and send another chamber off firing in a different direction. And then when you were all finished loading it up, you take one of these little caps and you put it on each of these little nipples here. Put a cap on there, and then you have a 6-shooter. You have a 6 shots, cock, fire, cock, fire. Amazing old gun. As I said, I do have a little bit more history on this. I was with my father when he purchased it, actually traded for it. It goes back to 1957 or 1958. Dad drove a truck, Mayflower Van Lines, and 2 summers, 57 and 58, he came through St. Louis, picked me up, threw me on the truck, and we went back and forth across the United States multiple times. I guess I got my wanderlust from him. But he had a German Luger, which itself was a collectible piece of work. And the history of the Luger goes back even further. There was a time back out west when Dad was hijacked by a guy, or attempted hijacking, and Dad thwarted that hijacking with he had a little 25 or 32, I don't know what, it's lost to history, a small little pistol that he managed to disarm the potential hijacker and relieve him of his German Luger. Well, he carried that thing for years, and when I was on the truck with him, we'd go out in the desert and shoot the heck out of that. But then one cold summer night up in the high country of Wyoming, Little America, Wyoming, truck stop up there, Dad took the Luger. He eventually said that he just didn't feel comfortable with it. He didn't know if it had ever been used in a crime or whatever. It was almost used in a crime against him. But he met another trucker up there that was willing to trade him the Luger for this. And so here he comes back with this. And from that time on, I can remember Dad just shooting the hell out of this gun. He just shot it and shot it and shot it. And I mean, he was one night back home, he heard somebody outside. This is suburbia, 1960s, and he heard some noise outside, and he come outside and he's shooting this thing off. This was his home defense gun. Shooting this thing up in the air, to scare off would-be robbers or something. What a story. But I can remember being out with him when he was shooting this thing, and before he learned to put he used Crisco eventually, but you had to put the lard in there to keep it from cross-firing. But before he learned how to do that, I remember one time he shot the gun, and one ball came out the barrel, and another one came out the cylinder next to it, rattling the weeds, scared the hell out of us. But again, the gun is in poor condition. It really need. I would never shoot this thing. It is absolutely dangerous to shoot at this point. But this there's somebody's initials carved in there, MT, and we always wondered about this. Kind of hard to see. Maybe it'll pick up, maybe it won't. But right up here, looks like notches. 3, 4, maybe 6 notches. Who knows? Are those real notches in the gun? If this gun can talk, I bet it would have a story. It would have an amazing story. Since it was made in 1864. Golly gee. I'd love to know about this gun. But it's mine now. And again, a family heirloom that's going to be passed down from generation to generation. these guns in pristine condition can go upwards of $20,000. You see them in good condition for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. In poor condition like this, maybe $500, $600, maybe $1,000. I don't know. This is just an iconic piece of U.S. history. A fabulous firearm. Dad picked up an old cheapy old holster, and knowing him, this looks like it was made in Mexico. It's not for the gun, obviously, but he spent a lot of time going down to Mexico, and this is where it looks like it was from, a leather holster. So I just keep it in there for safekeeping. But I don't know. It's just one of my favorite possessions, one of my prized possessions, and no one except me will have the memories of it, of Dad, and you know where it came from. But I can remember the night he came back to the truck with this, just like it was yesterday. You know, beautiful, beautiful memories. So there you have it, the 1851 Colt Navy revolver, cap and ball. Well, last but not least is this baby right here. This is a beauty. Unfortunately, I have almost no information for this. I don't know how Dad came into possession of it. I do remember him. I don't ever remember him shooting it, but I do remember he did have ammunition for it at one point. Again, he was always picking up something. And this is a Lafoucheau Belgian pinfire revolver. Okay, model 1851 or 1854. I can't remember which, but this gun is quite an enigma. It's a beautiful firearm. It's in excellent condition. It's got engraving all over the cylinder and the frame, and the bluing is in very good condition. It's not a valuable pistol from what I can determine on the internet. These things again were ubiquitous. I mean, back in the day, I know that during the Civil War, this gun probably dates pre-Civil War, or at least during, maybe slightly after, but probably before. And the Union Army was and the Confederate Army during the Civil War were having trouble getting firearms. Smith and Wesson and a few others were all involved in all sorts of patent infringements, and they couldn't get the firearms they needed. So both sides ended up sending emissaries to Europe to purchase firearms, and this is just one of the many types of firearms that came back to this country and supplied the troops. The revolvers were mainly for officers. I mean, the grunts out there in the field, they were carrying the big muskets and rifles. But so these were mainly for officers. But the Union Army imported about 12,500 of these, and not really a whole lot of records how many the Confederates had smuggled in past the blockades or whatever. But this gun was made by a company called, again, Lafoucheau. Casimir Lafoucheau started in the 1850s making this, and his son took over, Eugene Lafoucheau, I'm sorry. And it's a kind of a unique design. It's really a well-built pistol. It's a double action, single action. You can fire it double action or single action, and it's interesting. It's called a pin fire. This little gate opens up here. Okay, a little gate opens up, and you put the cartridge in there. And the cartridges were paper cartridges, but you can see right up here. There's a. It's hard to see there. There's a little notch there. in the cylinder where the paper cartridge went in, and a pin stuck out the side of the cartridge, so that when all 6 of these were loaded, you can see that the hammer came down on top of that pin, and that's what fired it. But it was quick loading. You drop it out, knock each one out, put 6 more in, and you're good to go. It's a tiny pistol. You know, it looks almost effeminate, really, but it is a 10 millimeter. I measured it. It looks to be 10 millimeter. This gun is hard to pin down because there's so many different styles of it. There's a 7 millimeter, 8 millimeter, 9 millimeter, 9.5 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 11 millimeter, 12 millimeter, all different size, different types of trigger guards. There was some with no trigger guards, some with a spur on it, different shaped handles. The main guns were made in Belgium, but for a while, to keep up with demand, some were made in France. And then after the Civil War, towards the 1870s or whatever, knockoffs of these were made all over Europe, France, Spain, even Russia. I mean, these guns were everywhere, and people were making, were copying the designs of them. And such a fine little pistol. I couldn't find much on it. There's no serial number on this. The serial number should be right up here, but instead there's only the letter C up there, and I don't know what that means. Could it stand for Confederate? I don't know. The only other markings on there are up on the cylinder, and it does have the Belgian proof mark. The Belgian proof mark is it's sort of like hard to see here. Looks like this, and that's stamped into the cylinder here. So those are the real. There's also a little crown with some lettering underneath. So I've just kind of exhausted myself on the internet looking for more of a history on this gun. So I don't know where it came from. I don't know where Dad got it. All I know is it's very, very old. Again, could have easily been used in the Civil War. From my understanding, the civilian models didn't have the spur on the trigger guard. The officer's model had kind of a spur on the back of it, a decorative thing, trigger spur, hold on to. But it is a beautiful little gun. I just love it. Good luck trying to get ammunition for it. I mean, I've seen ammunition out there in the different calibers for anywhere from $250 to $450 for a box of 50. In the original box, I'd love to have it, but I would never fire it. But Dad used to have some. I remember seeing the cartridges, paper, made out of paper with the little pin sticking out of the side of it. But that's all I know about it. Again, it's a family heirloom. It'll be passed down. Can't fire it even if I wanted to. But it's just in magnificent condition. So I have no idea what it's worth, but here it is. It's in my possession, and hopefully it will go down through the generations. So there it is, the model 1851 La Faucheux Belgian pinfire revolver.